1.5 behind you. This is the last lap. And behind him is Ajar, 2 seconds. Charles, 1.5 behind. Let him by. Fast.
Ferrari went from dominating free training to fall outside the top 7 in the race. Did the car, strategy, or both fail? Get ready to discover the complete autopsy of the worst red Sunday of the year. To understand why this Friday was so shocking, you have to go back to the chronic problems that Ferrari has dragged from previous seasons. The Italian team has been historically fast in free sessions, but inconsistent in classification and weak in race. This pattern has been so repetitive that fans already call it Friday Ferrari. But this time, with Hamilton in command, the story seemed different. The British was not only fast, but transmitted confidence, measured aggressiveness, and a technical domain that made it seem that the SF25 finally spoke his language. Comments on the paddock echoed quickly. Was Ferrari finding the course? Was Hamilton the catalyst for that transformation? Because in addition to the data, there was a powerful narrative in progress. The 7-time world champion was not only adapting to his new environment, he was leading him. And that, in a team as emotionally charged as Ferrari, has an incalculable weight. That Friday represented more than a good performance. It was the illusion that it could finally be built on a solid base. That the SF25, with all its limitations, could still be tuned to fight. That Hamilton's arrival was not only a media maneuver, but a real attempt to reconfigure the culture of a team that has been looking for his north for years. But as has happened with Ferrari so many times, the illusion did not last. The classification of the Azerbaijan Grand Prix was, for Ferrari, a free fall that began long before the traffic lights went out in Q1. What should be a consolidation session after a promising Friday became a painful chapter of strategic confusion, lack of fallen adaptation, and execution. All the momentum accumulated by Hamilton and Leclerc evaporated in a matter of minutes. And in the heart of this collapse, there was a technical decision that still generates debate: the use of soft C6 tires by Lewis Hamilton in Q2. To understand the seriousness of that error, several technical elements must be considered. The C6 compound, despite being softer, presented a lower operating window in the climatic conditions of Baku that Saturday. The track was colder, with bursts of wind that affected curve stability and pressure on the tires. On the other hand, the average compound C5, although in less fast theory, was showing a greater capacity to adapt to the changing conditions of the asphalt. It was 3/10 faster in long batches during previous practice and had offered better thermal performance during the buildup of Q1. Most of the leading teams understood and adjusted it. McLaren, Mercedes, even Red Bull. Ferrari no. In Q2, when the traffic was denser and the windows to mark a narrower competitive time, Hamilton came out with soft. It was a wrong bet from all angles. The tire did not reach optimal temperature at the ideal time. The car felt nervous, and the British, who had led the FP2 just 24 hours before, was caught in the P12, outside the Q3. That the most alarming was not just the wrong choice of the compound. It was the context that surrounded that decision. In the FP2, Ferrari had already wrapped a game of Hamilton average tires, leaving it with a committed assignment for classification. That is, poor management began on Friday and crawled until Saturday without correction. Lewis was clear in his statements after the session. "We knew that the medium was faster," they said it. "I felt it in the car. And we still went with the soft." His words were not just a technical criticism, they were a confession of deep frustration towards a team that, in theory, had brought his experience to solve these mistakes. On the other hand, Charles Leclerc managed to advance to Q3, but not without difficulties. His SF25 also evidenced problems finding grip. Although he managed to get into the top 10, he did it with a return to the limit, in a car that no longer behaved as he had done on Friday. In Ferrari, the course was lost, and the most worrying was internal uncoordination. What should be a meticulously executed session as required by a track like Baku, where every thousandth ended up being a reflection of Maranello's old problem: talent wasted by erroneous decisions from the wall. The classification in Baku was not simply a punctual failure. It was a manifestation of the structural dilemma that Ferrari faces: to have a competitive car circumstantially but not sustainable. Have two world-class pilots, but without a coherent tactical plan behind. Have a championship vision, but operating as if they were still in pre-season. This failed Q2 changed everything. He not only left Hamilton out of position for Sunday's race, but also undermined internal trust. What should be an ascending ladder towards the podium became a strategic slab that conditioned the rest of the weekend. And in Formula One, when you make classification mistakes, the consequences are multiplied in the race. In the case of Ferrari, that multiplier was devastating. Sunday in Azerbaijan was the bitter culmination of a weekend that began with promises and ended in despair. If on Friday I had generated illusions and on Saturday he presented strategic cracks, Sunday's race was the final blow that buried any hope for Ferrari. On a track that rewards peak speed, braking efficiency and strategic adaptation capacity, the Scuderia failed in each of those fronts. Lewis Hamilton ended up in a modest 8th position, while Charles Leclerc crossed the 9th goal. Neither of them could even play the fat points, and that, for a team with aspirations to the title, is not just disappointing. It is a structural failure. From the start, the problems were evident. Unlike other races, where Ferrari usually gains positions in the first measures thanks to its tensile and late braking capacity, here both cars were static. The SF25 did not generate confidence to the pilot, especially in the areas of high lateral load. The fast areas, where other cars could attack aggressively, became survival points for Hamilton and Leclerc. The car seemed not to communicate with the pilots. It was erratic in transitions, unstable in braking, and above all, slow in lines, where the aerodynamic drag played against him drama. The strategy, far from saving the day, finished burying it. Ferrari was not able to adapt to the different scenarios that opened during the race. He did not react to the virtual safety cars or to changes in degradation. In a circuit like Baku, where the entrance to boxes and synchronization with interruptions can make the difference between winning and losing valuable positions, Ferrari opted for a conservative approach. He kept his pilots more time on track with tires that had already passed their performance peak, waiting for an ideal window that never arrived. That passivity translated into gums overheating, loss of grip, and a loud fall in the rhythm by return. Meanwhile, teams like McLaren, Mercedes, and even Williams were reacting in real time. They adjusted their strategies, attacked in the critical phases, used extra engine power at key moments. Ferrari no. Ferrari simply waited. It was as if they were running a different career, one in which the priority was not to compete, but to avoid collapse. But the collapse came the same. Lewis Hamilton, in particular, lived a frustrating career. Trapped for many laps behind slower cars, unable to generate enough speed delta to advance even with open DRs. The SF25 had no straight speed, and what is worse, neither did the stability necessary to stop later than its rivals. In a circuit like Baku, that is a sentence of helplessness. And that was exactly what Hamilton projected from his cabin. Helplessness. Charles Leclerc, on the other hand, had a more complicated career. At specific times he showed speed flashes, but never managed to spin a clean stunt. The radios with their engineer were increasingly tense. He complained of balance, lack of traction, overheating. The car simply did not respond. The frustration was evident. And not only on the track. In Ferrari's box, the team's body language was eloquent. Nobody had answers. Ferrari's Sunday in Azerbaijan was more than a bad result. It was the tangible demonstration that even with elite and potential pilots in classification, the team still does not have the tools or technical or strategic to compete on full weekends. But what exactly does a narrow operational window mean? In simple terms, it means that the car only works well if multiple very specific conditions are fulfilled simultaneously. Asphalt temperature within a precise range, pressure and temperature of carefully controlled tires, perfectly balanced aerodynamic load, and absence of disruptive external factors such as lateral wind, moisture in the asphalt, or intense traffic. When any of these variables leaves the script, the car loses stability, traction, braking capacity, and with it, any option of being competitive. And that is not just an engineering problem. It is a conceptual limitation that affects every decision of the team. How they are prepared on weekends, how they manage long batches, how the strategies calibrate depending on the weather or the type of track. It is a chain of decisions conditioned by the fear of getting out of that ideal strip. While other teams refine on a flexible base, Ferrari lives on the verge of permanent decompensation. The most worrying thing is that the pilots know it. Hamilton and Leclerc have mentioned each other in their own way in the radios and interviews. Leclerc has summarized it as losing confidence in the car in each lap when conditions change. Hamilton has been more technical. We cannot afford that some wind or 2 degrees of difference change the entire balance. These phrases, although discreet, are indications of a problem that is not solved with an aerodynamic update or with a more aggressive strategy. It is a problem that demands to rethink the architecture of the car, the setup approach, and even the design philosophy. And this is where the circle closes. The operational window is not only narrow, it is treacherous. Because when it is right, as happened on Friday FP2, Ferrari seems to have the pace to compete against anyone. But when it fails, as in classification or career, the collapse is total. There are no intermediate points. There is no containment capacity. There are only light or shadow. And in a championship where regularity is more valuable than the flashes, Ferrari is betting his season to a currency in the air every weekend. The result in Azerbaijan was simply the logical consequence of this cursed design.